So Phil Frampton is an author who I've featured on my show in the past, and he's very passionate and doesn't shy away when it comes to talking about what he describes as a very traumatic childhood, being raised not knowing his parents, raised in care, and as often the only child of colour in the UK care system. His book titled The Golly in the Cupboard is a no holds barred look at his treatment in that system. Now, those experiences have led him to not only adapt his book but to write a single titled Our Town Now. Now, in my chat with Phil Frampton, he talks of the difficulties of his childhood that led to his book.
It's my childhood memoir. I was born in care back in the 1950s because my father was basically kicked out of the country. He was at Nigerian and he was seeing my mother. And before she even knew she was pregnant, he was put on a boat, on the Apapa boat in Liverpool, and sent back to Nigeria. She was a white English music teacher in Birmingham, and she, in those days, if you were a woman who had a child out of wedlock, you'd lose your job. So without anything else to fall back on, basically she left me in the care of an unmarried mother's home in Cornwall, and at the time they said there was no one in Cornwall or Devon or the Southwest who would foster a black, half-caste, Igbo, half-Igbo, coffee-coloured child, yeah? So, or even adopt one. When I was 10 days old, Bernardo's issued a health report on me, and the form said, like, had diphtheria? No. Had measles? No. Had chickenpox? No. Had blah, blah, blah? No. Any other physical defects or maladies? The person wrote half-caste. So then I was about 9 months old when I was moved to a home for handicapped kids, as they were called at the time. That was probably on the basis of that report. I don't know. That was in Devon. Then my mother said she would like me closer to her, so I moved up to Shrewsbury in Shropshire. And then I was still 1 year old when she decided she wanted to marry a Norwegian guy, and he didn't want anything to do with me. So they discussed my adoption was discussed by Bernardo's, and they said he's a poor specimen of humanity and there is doubts about his intelligence. And I ended up in a kids' home in Southport. And so when I wrote a couple of pieces in The Guardian about my files, which Bernardo's had kept on me, and found all this story out, I wrote in there that I was tossed back in the cupboard like a one-eyed gollywog. Now, in care we talk about being tossed around like rag dolls, being pushed around from one place to another. I was a black kid, and so the gollywog was a more appropriate analogy or symbol, and like a damaged toy. So that was like a one-eyed gollywog. Yes, so I wasn't perfect. So I was put back in there. Actually, I didn't particularly mind at the time because I was used to being in orphanages, and when the vicar and his family came to see me first time, it was reported that I cried because I wanted to stay and play with the other kids in the home. So I was brought up in Southport and in orphanages, yes. And at 15, I was fostered out. I didn't want to be. Then you could live on your own. But I wanted to go into a bedsit, but they wouldn't let me. I had this foster placement. It was an abusive foster placement. But by the time I got to 16, I was out of there, and I was finally got to living on my own just by the Southport railway station in a sort of bedsit land. But I was relatively happy there because I was free of adults. I was still at school, studied, never missed a day of school, and I went on to Bristol University. What The Golly in the Cupboard really was I wanted to say, look, our childhood was a valid childhood. It was just a childhood. We were kids, and where we had a relative stability in a children's home, where we weren't being thrown around from one foster placement to another, then we could build on our own resources. We were like siblings. We looked after each other. We cared for each other. We had a relative stability. We had friends in school and so forth. And that stability meant that we could progress. And many of us did progress at the time. So a very different system to today. But it was about defending that childhood that we had. But also reflecting on the casual racism of the day, which led to various prejudices which determine a large part of my childhood. But at the end, I say it's not what circumstances made of me, it's what I made of circumstances, it's what we make of circumstances, how we respond to them, which is the critical issue in these things. I didn't even know they had files on me until I was 45. So it was like almost 30 years after I'd left care. So I'd really not much idea about my story. However, when I was 14, I was taken into the matron, that's like the head of the home, into her study and told that my mother was dead. Now, before then, I didn't know I had a mother, or who my mother was, who my father was, anything. So it was like a little bit of a surprise. You've got a mother? Oh, sorry, you haven't. So then, two women who had been sending me presents, I had no idea. They were just like anti this and anti that. And if you wrote a letter to them, a thank you letter, they sent you a present next time, it was your birthday or Christmas or whatever. They announced that they were my godmothers and began to tell me stuff about my mother. But it wasn't the full truth. In fact, one of them said in a letter to the other one, he must never know the truth. And that's in the Golly in the Cupboard as well. So there's that side of it, of people effectively thinking they are protecting, not, in that case, they weren't protecting me, they were protecting another family. But so I was effectively lied to about some of the circumstances of my childhood. And it's not an uncommon experience for people who've been through the care system in relation to why they ended up in care in the first place. Growing up in Southport was very, very white. This is a new version of Golly in the Cupboard. It's expanded. It's got a lot more on the position of unmarried mothers at that time because it was pretty horrific for them because they were persecuted and abused. A lot of people think about Ireland and the Magdalene homes. It was just as bad in many of the unmarried mothers' homes here. So that's available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. So you can just download it onto your Kindle if you've got one.
UK Black with Ngunan Adamu.
I've done a couple of events at Southport for Black History Month before. So last year I wrote a rap about what it was like growing up there with all the pressure of racism, yes. And we used to scurry around the town, black children on our own, trying to stand our ground but feeling so alone. Take the bruised black eye but never, never cry. Punch them in the mouth to stop that word come out. Take a detour around that street, it's where the bullies meet. Take your fists on a bus in case they make a fuss at sitting next to you because your skin ain't true. And this sort of rap, spoken word, was my way of telling the story in a different way about it. And then we heard the teachers taught we came from jungle, running from Tarzan and causing trouble. On streets we heard the monkey cries. 1,000 times we wept inside, 1,000 times we died inside. And that's to say, the impact of that racial abuse of growing up in that type of situation. But the role of education, if you like, the role of the state, it's in propping up those views that we were somehow, as black people, we were uncivilized, we were the savages and so forth. That's the type of era I grew up in. So Our Town Now actually comes from a story about racial oppression. I'd say to everybody, just listen to it. It's available on YouTube, Apple Music and so forth. We're actually going to produce a different upbeat version, which is different. And we're just looking at a couple of people at the moment to get it out and take it around the labels. But for me, it's a very powerful track. It comes from my childhood, but it's a childhood of so many black kids and mixed race kids who grew up in this country. Our Town Now, it's our town now. Our children live side by side. We'll share the same fairground ride, laugh and run hand in hand into the sunny sands of time, because it's our town now. And that's that sense of now. Those words, our town now, are actually on page 297 of this book. When I returned to Southport after many, many years and met up with my childhood sweetheart, who was also mixed race from the home, yes, and she had a daughter with her. We met up at Chapel Street Station in Southport, and then we went to visit our old home on Beach Road near Victoria Park. And as we went through the town, we walked through arm in arm. I said, "It's our town now." Because before we used to scurry around the town, black children on our own, it wasn't our town. Nothing was ours, especially because we were in care. But now there was that sense of getting rid of that vulnerability. And I think for many black and Asian people, will feel vulnerable living in certain areas still today. But for the majority of us living in the cities and the towns, we're in a much stronger position.
What is it that keeps you going? Because what you do, it's not easy. And for some people, they would have given up. You know, you've written books, you've now done this song, you campaign, you've gone to university, you've gone to university again, you've continued studying, you've developed yourself. What keeps you going?
Hope and belief in humanity. I am a Marxist by study and education and by campaigning and so forth. And also, you could say I'm a humanist in that I believe in the goodness of humanity. And I've seen it. And I was brought up with it. With my kids, I was brought up with. And we had that collectivity, which was an understanding that it's not simply about you. It's about, you can't only live in this world if you understand that we need each other. We are collective. When I was in orphanage and care, it dawned on me when I was 13 or 14 that I could possibly get to university. So I studied and I studied. I hated being in care. Yeah, but I had nowhere else to go, so it was just that. I hated the poverty, the neglect, and everything, and it was exposed because I was going to the grammar school in Southport, so I'd see all these rich kids and so forth. So all I had was living for tomorrow, working for tomorrow, and living for tomorrow. So tomorrow always means a lot to me. Yeah? Sometimes it's very difficult to live in the moment, and that's my special bonus sometimes, to try and live in the moment. But we can't forget tomorrow, and we know there's so much to be done. I generally have quite a cheerful disposition because I could live in tomorrow. How did I get to where I was lucky as well. There were things which I missed. Many kids in my kids' home, they were abused. Many of them. I was lucky to escape that in a kids' home. I was in an abusive placement in foster care, but I was lucky, and then I got out of that quite quickly. That's why I ended up living on my own. But it's like, it's not all about, you must be this and you must be that. Sometimes it's just luck. I know kids who were in that home who just had ordinary jobs. Their children are now barristers, lawyers, and so forth. Yeah. So they had it within them to do that. They didn't get the breaks.
So true.
Yeah.
It's so true. What would you like our listeners to get from Our Town Now?
Hope and determination to campaign, to keep going, and particularly collectively to look to their communities and work with their communities for change. Because it's only when we do it together that we're going to get any change. Someone said to me, a music producer, he said, why don't you change it to My Town Now? And I thought, well, I'll try it, but it didn't work. No, it didn't work. It's a collective story, Without my other kids in the kids' home, where would I have been? Yeah, I would have been completely isolated. And when it's 10-1 against you, you understand why you need other people. Yes, and it's without that campaigning, without that working together, we are nothing. We're isolated. We're atomized, and that's where some people would like us to be, because that's when we don't have any power. So our power is with each other, and that's what I hope people will take from that, and the hope and the understanding that we've got some of the way. It's not all the way, but we've got some of the way. So let's keep pushing to get the whole way.
So where can people go to listen to Our Town Now? Our
Town Now, you could go to YouTube, you can buy it on Apple Music, you can buy it on Spotify, you can buy it on most of the streamlining stations. So I hope people will get to enjoy it and share it with your friends. Share it, share the music and share the message. Hi, this is Bill Frampton, and this is Our Town Now, featuring Senya Dubrovska, a beautiful violinist. The N-word. Sometimes it began with a W, an S or a D, or it started with the N, a B or a C, but it all meant the same to my black friends, and me it was the N-word. We used to scurry around the town, black children on our own, trying to stand our ground but feeling so alone. Take the bruised black eye but never, never cry. Punch them in the mouth to stop that word come out. Take a detour around that street, it's where the bullies meet. Take your fist on the bus in case they make a fuss at sitting next to you because your skin ain't true. The N-word. But we wouldn't run away. It was said to see us cry. We'd stand our ground and fight at the N-word. "50 years on and the word hasn't gone, but it's our town now. So many times they had hate on their minds, and 2 against 10 we would turn a blind eye. So many times we swallowed our pride, waiting by the shore for the turn of the tide. Once we were picked on one by one, now we know we're not on our own. Most people understand there is no eternal plan. We can march, woman and man, girl and boy, hand in hand to each our promised land. We can fight, black and white, tall and short, thin and wide, every child, gender beside, stepping out for our rights. Why? Because it's our town now. Our town now. Winning words. Still people working every day to keep the haters at bay and boosting people's knowledge of our common bonds and heritage and reasons to strive for a world that is alive, because it's our town now. It's our town now. The N-word, it still begins with a W, an S or a D, or it starts with the N, a B or a C. And it still spells the same to my black friends and me. It's the N-word. Yes, 50 years on and the word hasn't gone, but it's our town now. The teachers taught we came from jungle, running from Tarzan or causing trouble. On streets we faced the monkey cries, 1,000 times we wept inside, 1,000 times we died inside. So many souls made the sacrifice to bring to all the truths of life. Now most people understand there is no eternal plan. We will march, woman and man, girl and boy, hand in hand to each our promised land. We will fight, black and white, tall and short, thin and wide, every child, gender beside, stepping out for our rights. Why? Because it's our town now. Our town now. We still need winning words. That's why people still work every day to keep the haters at bay and boosting people's knowledge of our common bonds and heritage and the reasons to strive for a world that is alive, because it's our town now. Our town. Remember, the N-word still begins with a W, an S or a D, or it starts with the N, a B or C. And it still spells the same to my black friends and me. It's the N-word. Yet they couldn't keep us down. Now we're thousands in this town. So many working every day to keep the haters at bay. Our children living side by side, share the same fairground ride. Laugh and run hand in hand across our sunny sands of time into a world that is alive, because it's our town now. It's our town now. Yes, it's our town now. Yes, they couldn't keep us down. Now our voices have been found. Our infants wear their skin with pride and see no colour in a child. They laugh and run hand in hand across our sunny sands of time into a world that is alive, because it's our town now. Yes, it's our town now. Our town now.
A very powerful piece, and for those who are, have lived trauma, I always say, creativity is another way of challenging that and supporting yourself. And I think Phil Frampton has done an amazing job of, looking after himself and his mental health by putting on the book and now with his song Our Town Now.